Oh, bless.
By the name of Wihan from the Riet. He had his kicking academy in South Africa, Rocketfoot, and he was like,
that's such a great name for a kicking academy, Rocketfoot. I like
see
that.
Him kick you understand why he's like animal leg.
It sometimes feels like you guys are putting sound effects to the kicks, that the way that you kick the ball, and it just comes off the foot like you can't believe.
I went out and sought tuition from numerous different sources, the RFU, Rugby Bricks, School of Kicking, but none were more influential for the way that I thought about the game and life broadly speaking than Wihan van der Riet, also known as Rocketfoot on Instagram, who added a layer of detail to my thinking for everything that I did, beyond what I was previously capable of seeing.
From nearly a decade of coaching kickers in both American football and rugby industries, here's the logical path that most kickers follow when they start out goal kicking and are left to their own instincts. There are two paradigms of thinking when it comes to goal kicking development. There's everything else, and then there's ProForm kicking, which we'll discuss at a later stage. Everything else really falls in the same category for me because it's really based on the same sort of pattern of thinking. And so that's what we're going to discuss right now. We call this the external target paradigm. So I've worked with thousands of kickers, young and old, American football, rugby players, and they all start off thinking the exact same way when they're developing a movement system to kick the ball. The very first thing they do is they identify this perceived target, and this perceived target is the goalpost, and the reason why we call it an external target is because it's outside of the movement system. It's an external target, and we're dealing with a right-footed kicker here, so we'll just use a right footer as an example. He's gone 3 or 4 steps back and 2 steps over, and this angle puts him in a relationship relative to the ball and the target, where the target or the perceived target, this external target, is to his peripheral left. The next part of the process is the kicker visualizes a flight path for the ball that intersects these uprights, or obviously goes through the goalpost. The problem with this is, from his perspective, that flight path is left of him. And so this brings us to the final part of the process, where the kicker tries to replicate this flight path with some imitative movement and introduces rotation and preemptive turning in the approach and swing path, which is what is causing all of the problems. The moment the kicker sees the goalpost, the brain begins to simulate the visual outcome, a flight path from the ball to this perceived target. Instinctively, the swing path must turn, since this external target is to the kicker's left. The kicker instinctively begins to turn and rotate during the approach in the attempt to recreate this visualized path. And in doing so, they break alignment, they become unbalanced, and they create a lateral swing shape, the natural path of which is across the target in conflict with the natural direction of the kicker's momentum. This is the external target fixation paradigm, which is a paradox. And it's a problem for kickers because it disregards the geometry, physics, and natural biomechanics involved in the kicking movement. In this paradigm, the kicker is required to master counterproductive movements that fight against their natural biomechanics. It causes interruptions in flow, and it creates misalignments, causing a weak and unbalanced body position, making the kick far more difficult to execute, increasing athletic and cognitive demands. The predicted path becomes the movement model, and kickers and kicking coaches, they work within this flawed paradigm to improve themselves and their techniques. However, the very foundation of this model is the flaw, and nothing within it can ever flow naturally or unimpeded, or is achievable without any compensatory movements. The misaligned body is accommodated by higher and higher kicking tees. The lack of real momentum and weight transfer is accommodated by bigger and more exaggerated backswings. For extremely gifted athletes, they can find a way to make it work within this paradigm. but the developmental potential is severely limited. Hi, my name is Wihan van der Riet, and I've been embedded in the world of professional kicking for the past 12 years as both a competitor and a coach.
Hey guys, I'm telling you, this guy, Wihan Rocketfoot van der Riet, should be playing at some professional level of football.
And I would eventually get signed in the Canadian Football League at the age of 32, after pursuing a pro kicking job for about 10 years. But this story is about much more than a South African who traveled to a foreign land to compete in a sport that he'd never played before. As a rugby player, I was a very accomplished kicker, and my ability to kick the ball really far was part of the reason I got scouted in the first place. However, arriving at my first pro camp in San Diego, California, I had the realization that everybody I was competing against understood that getting the ball through the uprights was just an accepted standard. The competition revolved around something much deeper. It revolved around the quality of ball that you could kick. This is how NFL scouts and coaches would identify and separate league quality kickers from the rest. Metrics like hang time, placement, operation time, trajectory, rotation, and ball speed were all foreign to me, but these were the things that were analyzed, and the ball going through the upright, although important, would make up just one small part of your scout report. It was no longer possible to rely on strength and athleticism as I've done my entire life. The differentiator in this arena was mechanical efficiency, of which I had very little, until I met Mike Hollis.
Mike Hollis from 54 yards. They get it down cleanly. Hollis! Whoa! Got it! Holy mackerel!
180 pounds, not a very great athlete. I was above average athlete. I was a varsity soccer player in high school and varsity football player, obviously, but I'm not an incredibly strong and freakishly athletic kid. There's got to be something to why I was able to play at the highest level of football in the world. I scored more points than any player in the NFL in 1997. A lot of people don't realize that, but I was the leading scorer in the NFL, me. And I tell these kids, I say, listen, I'm not trying to impress you. I'm trying to impress upon you that someone like me was able to do what I did as a very average athlete, 5'7", 180 pounds. Based on those three facts, I should have never played in the NFL, but I did. Why was that? Mechanics, because I had good mechanics. I knew what I was doing. And the nutshell of the stuff I'm teaching is all about using every bit of you as a person, as a body, as whatever you can, into the kick.
That full body potential starts with one fundamental shift in paradigm, a shift that will manifest possibilities that simply do not exist in the external target paradigm. That shift begins with 5 simple words. The ball is the target.
What does it mean that the ball is the target, Marucci?
That the ball is the target mindset, that's a game changer, Wihan. Your system speaks to making the ball the target. It's not just a principle that you write on your tee, the ball is the target, stay up. Your system speaks to keeping the ball the target.
Yes, targeting the ball represents a fundamental shift in the way that goal kicking is approached. Unlike traditional techniques that emphasize the goalpost as the target and encourage steering or guiding the ball towards them, ProForm establishes the ball itself as the target. This change in focus is more than symbolic. It's the foundation of the ProForm method. Everything the kicker aims to achieve, perfect balance, perfect alignment, perfect posture, a perfect swing, and a seamless follow-through, it all hinges on this core idea. Now, I've said a lot about the ball being the target, and of course it's not as simple as just making the ball the target and then the rest of the mechanics just happen. But it is an integral step in sort of a mind shift that the kicker has to make. I think we've established this during this presentation. But there's a literal and metaphorical fork in the road during the kicker's approach, and that fork is characterized by either the ball being the target and either the goalpost being the target, and either one of those things fosters a different type of intent by the kicker, and that intent will lead to the type of mechanics that you are able to accomplish when kicking the ball. So let's look at some of these other core concepts that tie into the ball being the target and what you're able to then accomplish, and what you have to do in order to establish and maintain the ball as the sole target.
Recht naar die bal toe, bly lekker lank, follow through na die bal. Daai is 'n proses.
Met my heupe, skouers, alles na die bal wys. Daar. En weet jy, hou my voete dop. Ek loop reguit, alles is na die bal toe.
An approach line that is aimed directly at the ball or even slightly too narrow forces the kicker to create space dynamically later in the approach, just to make room for the swing phase. This is necessary because it's physically impossible to occupy the same space as the ball and still kick it. To generate that swing space, the kicker must make a sudden change of direction, often at or near the ball. This reactive adjustment triggers a chain of causes and effects. Deviating from the original alignment will directly affect the kicker's mechanics, balance, and overall body position. Instead of allowing good mechanics to emerge naturally through proper alignment, kickers who are taught to approach the ball head-on are forced to rely more heavily on athleticism. This not only increases cognitive load and energy expenditure, but also reduces energy transfer into the ball because the kicker's movement is no longer flowing efficiently through a unified motion. In simple terms, the kicker starts out of alignment and must try to find alignment dynamically. But because of the nature of momentum and timing, any alignment that they manage to create mid-kick will never allow the body to work together in total unison. One of the most overlooked concepts is the concept of separation and the kicker maintaining alignment through this idea of separation. This is not something that's discussed that I've ever seen in any other kicking technique, but this is something that's crucial in order for the ProForm kicker to make his alignment work. Now, essentially ideally what the kicker wants is to establish the perfect relationship between him and the ball at the start of the approach and then maintain that alignment until he makes contact with the ball, eliminating any sort of need for any overcorrection or adjustments closer and closer to the ball. In this example, the kicker on the left has an approach line directed at the ball, whereas the kicker on the right has an approach line separated from the ball. The kicker on the left is left with no room and is required to overcorrect and make real-time adjustments during the swing phase, which causes a loss of balance and a weak, non-uniform body position at impact. The kicker on the right is able to maintain his alignment and swing forward with his full potential and full range of motion. As a result of no required overcorrections, the kicker on the right is far more balanced and achieves a strong, uniform body position at impact. I think at this point it's important to answer this question because most people would be wondering about this, and it is a logical question to have. If the ProForm ball is the target paradigm suggests that the kicker should not turn or preemptively rotate before they've kicked the ball, then how does that rotation happen? Do we just swing to the right of the target? Of course not. And this is just simple physics and natural biomechanics that is taking place. The kicker is going to land on a plant foot on his left leg here, as in this picture, and that left leg is going to create a stoppage, a temporary stoppage or a deceleration in the left-hand side of the body. All of that is going to decelerate. At the same time, the kicking leg is swinging in this original direction that the kicker was facing and running in the first place. Remember, there's no preemptive turning or rotation. So that means that the swing path direction is actually in the same direction the kicker is facing when he starts the approach. And so that means the interplay between these two forces, this decelerative force and this accelerative force, is what causes the rotation to naturally happen. The trajectory and direction of the kick is then determined by the kicker landing on exactly the correct plant foot location.
I'm really committed to staying back behind the golf ball to send it. And so what I'd like to try and feel is if I really stand on this right leg, really stand on it, put all the weight driving in the ground, and try and basically hit up on as much as I possibly can.
Another concept unique to ProForm kicking technique is our body position at impact. When you look at it, it's straight. It's a straight line from plant foot through the rest of the body, and it's behind the ball, which is sort of in contrast to what most kicking coaches and kickers talk about when they refer to making contact with the ball. They often talk about having their heads over the ball, and the body is, as a result, in a very sort of compromised position. And I'm not too sure if this is what they're trying to accomplish, or if it's more of a result of a lack of separation, changing direction, making adjustments, and having a swing path that's sort of in conflict with where the natural momentum of the body wants to go. The ProForm body position is not unique in terms of body position at impact when compared to other sports, things like baseball and golf and even throwing a javelin. These athletes understand the benefit of having your body in a straight, uncompromised line and having your weight behind the object or the club head or the ball. Continuing with the theme of causes and effects, this body position is not something that needs to be manufactured or adjusted to accomplish at the ball. It's more of a result of very precise running mechanics. We teach our kickers to pull themselves forward using their hamstrings, because this pulling mechanism is what keeps the body tall and vertical. And as a result, the kicker then entering the swing phase of the kick, they're already in this backward body position entering the plant foot. As you can tell, it's impossible to explain just one part of the ProForm technique in isolation without having to highlight its relationship to another part of the form. And that is because ProForm is purely a cascade of causes and effects. ProForm is this collection of relationships that are systematically programmed to act together as one. Now, there are many opinions and experts out there, and I've faced my fair share of resistance and criticism, but I'll conclude this presentation through saying this. We are surrounded by undeniable universal truths. In our universe, there are patterns and sequences that repeat at every level. Now, what if I told you that ProForm technique is programmed through using these same patterns and sequences? We are simply following the breadcrumbs, the same breadcrumbs followed by Da Vinci. That is why I know that ProForm is as close to a universal truth that a kicking technique can be. The same way that I know that there's an intimate connection between a seashell and a flower, or a butterfly and the structure of DNA, the spiraling Milky Way galaxy and the very eyeballs through which you're watching this video presentation. They all share the same universal source code, manifesting divine proportion and aesthetic symmetry. The opportunities to work with highly skilled, world-class athletes has been far and few between. Not for the lack of trying, not for the lack of interest, but just because that's just the way that it goes sometimes. High-profile players end up at franchises and unions who often have in-house kicking coaches and consultants, and therefore I've lost plenty of opportunities to develop these types of talents. But before I end this video presentation, I want to show you what is possible when a kicker fully commits to what we teach. This is Henry Nall, whom I started working with in his final year of high school in South Africa. Henry is now in his 7th season as a professional kicker in the United States, and at one point we were even signed to the same Canadian Football League team.